Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of Dynamics Fortnite Fridays.
Where we cover everything Dynamics great and small. Welcome to the new year, Bart.
It is 2026. I guess let's say good riddance to 25. Why not?
Yeah. So it's like if you think about it, right, and it just kind of struck me, a quarter of the century is already over. A quarter
Isn't
of the
that just
century.
crazy?
Yeah, it's like it gives you perspective, right? And I just remember having a partial head of hair in 1999 and waiting for 2000. So those
We
those
must
are
be old farts. We were both
yeah, exactly.
remembering the millennium change as something
Okay.
that was like recent.
Yeah. Speaking of jokes about my hair, do we have any good dad jokes?
Well, always, always. So I threw a couple in my backlog here that will
Okay.
make a little more sense as we get going in today's show, I think.
Okay.
But
Okay.
what do you call someone who's really excited about Monday mornings?
On vacation.
Even better,
Okay.
retired.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Yeah. All right.
And I'll even follow it up with another kind of silly one. So,
Okay.
why did the retiree cross the road?
Uh, um, he had nothing better to do.
Yeah, to
That-
get to his other recliner.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Okay. Let's see what I have here.
All
Let's
right,
see.
all
I'm
right.
pulling from the dad jokes, and let's see what we have for the dad jokes. And again, don't look at these. What did the grape do when he got stepped on? He let out a little wine. Okay.
Line.
That was actually not
Wow,
bad. That's not
that was
bad.
actually
I mean,
one of the better cards.
exactly. It's like
Yeah,
most of them
yeah,
suck pretty bad, but it's like, kind of speaking about retirement and the two retiree jokes, it's like this is actually just be a random with the wine. It's like, retiring and having a glass of wine.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
This is my last show. I am retiring at the end of the month. So I
That's
am,
really sad. Really
yeah,
sad.
yeah. After 34 years in the industry, I think it's time to kind of do chapter 2.0. So,
So
yeah,
it's sad for us. It's very exciting, and I'm really
yeah.
happy for you, Dan, that this is
Well, thank
something
you.
that everybody works a whole career so that they can do what you're about to do. And I hope you have lots of fun times with the kids and eventually the grandkids and your family and
Yeah.
all the volunteer things you'll probably end up doing. And just all of it should be awesome.
You know me well, and that's exactly what I'm doing. It's like, and Bart, I just want to give a heartfelt thank you to you. It's like working with you has been fantastic. We've done this show since April of 2018.
Isn't that
So
crazy?
this is going on what, 8 years? This has been a fixture in a lot of folks' lives for their careers. So with
Well,
that,
we don't
again,
plan to
thanks
stop
everybody.
the show, everyone's. We do plan to continue it, and we'll have another guest that will join, and we'll see if they enjoy doing the show regularly, and if so, they might become the permanent fixture to cover all of the things that Dan usually takes care of. So we'll announce that as they join on the next show.
All right, something to look forward to. But in the meantime, we have work to do, Bart. So what kind of news do we got?
All right, well, let me share my screen here, and we can just jump right in. This is going to be the total anomaly, given that it's your last show, in that I have almost no content. I think all the people in Power Platform and CE got through Ignite and said, I'm beat. I'm just going to take the rest of the year off. So we'll see. It should get a lot better as we kind of roll into the more productive part of January here. But
Highly unusual.
anyway,
Yep, yep.
one of the things that I have noticed is that there was some interesting guidance given that if you would like an even more sophisticated and even more controlled way to hand over conversations that your kind of Copilot Studio agent is having with someone to someone who is a person who is in a contact center type environment, that we've got the traditional handover way of doing it that's kind of built right into Copilot Studio. But if you're willing to crack open a little Visual Studio or VS Code, that there are some interesting ways to use kind of the APIs and other ways to orchestrate some things that will allow even more control left in Copilot Studio to take control of the conversation if the agent is finished, but the person on the other end kind of can still ask some questions of the Copilot Studio agent instead of the person agent who might already be asking. So if you want to enable that, take a look at this particular blog post and you'll get some ideas of how it might work. We do have a what's new. It's kind of interesting that the what's new is actually from November and we're now in January, but that is the latest what's new and we haven't covered it yet. There's quite a bit of stuff that gets announced in here, and what's even more ironic is even though this was the November announcements for what's new in Copilot Studio, there's quite a few things that got announced that haven't yet hit the product. So be watching for these things to light up soon. But lots of stuff got talked about in Ignite. I don't think I need to sort of rehash that. One of the biggest things is we've done some nice things with kind of natively allowing a checkbox connection of everything in Copilot Studio to things like Defender to try to make sure and monitor even more closely for threats coming through those conversational interfaces. Agent 365, of course, big news, and trying to do a better job of having all of your agents, whether they're made in Copilot Studio or Agent Builder or Foundry or other platforms out there, having one control plane for all of those, and to even at some point start giving some of those agents their own licenses to use things like Outlook and OneDrive and apps, and to be able to do things on their own but have their own identity so that you can track exactly what they do versus when they impersonate a human and kind of attribute what goes on to the human behind the scenes. So anyway, all that good stuff is still out there. GPT-5 is the default now in Copilot Studio. You probably are aware of that, and that you can get to 5.2, whether it's the chat one or the reasoning one. You can get to Claude Sonnet 4.5. There's lots of interesting things with models out there. There's some updates in the human in the loop stuff. Most people who are fairly active have seen this out there for a little while, but that request for information to make sure a human gets brought in to oversee kind of what the agent has taken care of is a really nice thing. If you use Outlook and SharePoint tools, you can now actually kind of build many orchestrated ways to interact with multiple types of functions directly in those connectors that can be grouped up. Or there's now also the native MCP servers for those that allow you to just use the MCP server as a tool and give it instructions if you don't want to use this grouping. So a couple of different things you can do there. In the SharePoint space, where you're grounding your agent on SharePoint documents, especially, that we have under the covers upgraded the logic that it uses to do the query of the semantic index and what all it does to try to make sure that it is bringing the most quality responses back that it can figure out how to do. So you should have just gotten a pretty significant upgrade under the covers without you having to change anything at finding SharePoint content more accurately and all the stuff that's in your documents. I don't believe that this has anything to do with SharePoint list gathering of information. I think it's only the document side of it. Agent Builder has some new things that got announced. One of them is that it's now powered by GPT-5, which I think that did happen as far as I can tell. But in Agent Builder, this ability to move your agent directly into Copilot Studio or the copy to Copilot Studio, I haven't seen that light up yet. I assume that it's going to come any day. Employee self-service agent is live. If you don't have it, contact your customer success organization or Fast Track if you're working with them, and they should be able to help you get it enabled in your tenant. But this is pretty cool, and it can not only do things natively in what we've built just to help employees and to talk to SharePoint information, but we have ways to look at it from the IT perspective. If you're using ServiceNow as your ITSM tool and have a lot of knowledge and all that kind of stuff, there's pre-built functionality for that. And if you want to enable the HR side of it, we have connectors into Workday and we have connectors into SuccessFactors through SAP to be able to tie into all of that kind of stuff. So lots of good stuff on that employee self-service pre-built functionality that you still have to put a little effort into configuring, but becomes really useful for a lot of employees to help them get stuff done. In Agent Builder, you can now connect to just people if you needed to work with just sort of traversing your org chart as part of what the agent can do. We've been able to generate documents for a little while. We used to call it Code Interpreter. We've now changed the name of that. It's still the same basic functionality, but it's now called Generate Documents, Charts, and Code. I think it's a better name, but it's the same basic functionality, but you can now create those documents directly in Copilot. OneNote is now a knowledge source, so lots of cool stuff. in Copilot Studio. Last thing that I've got is really something that came out in the Admin Center's announcement pages, but I thought it was worth calling out specifically that if you haven't noticed, if you are building Power Pages in your organization and you have a need to control which authentication providers are allowed for the makers to choose between as they scaffold together their site, that there is now a control in the Power Platform Admin Center to be able to do just that. And I'm even going to just switch over really quick because it took me a little while to figure it out that if you go to Manage and Power Pages, I was looking around and I was clicking into sites, but it's actually right here on the page that you have to go to governance controls and then enable authentication providers. And then you can kind of start choosing what you want to enable or not enable for which sites. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and hand it over to you, Dan, to run through all of your content one last time.
All righty, lad. This is the last one, isn't it?
It is.
Okay. So it better be a good one. Otherwise, it'll be a blooper reel forever. So, okay, I don't like, and I have to admit, it's like that's the least amount of content we've done in many, many years, Bart. So I got the feeling there's like a kind of a backlog and and a log jam of things that are gonna be coming for the next few weeks. So
We'll see.
watch out, everybody. So I don't have a ton of stuff either, right? So there wasn't that many updates, but I thought there was a couple important ones, right? So there's been some updates in project operations, right? Remember, we have the 3 types. We have the light deployment, we have the integration with the invoice, and then we have the what used to be the PMA module, right? So this is like the project operations core. This is the CE based component. So this is light and for the regular project ops, right? So the first one is the billing hub phase 3. So it's like this is the third phase. It's like putting together the billing hub, right? And so based upon the customer feedback that they wanted more visibility, to what's ready and not ready to invoice, we streamlined the invoice creation of that, made it a whole lot easier. I know that on the PMA side that can be kind of a chore. There's instant amount calculations within that, which is really nice to have, right? So you can actually do it right on the screen. They can do the calculations, better notifications, instant notifications. And then there's been performance and user interface enhancements. And that's always going to be a good thing there, right? There's also a new time phase approvals view. So it's a clear, more concise, right? So the time approvals are shown like 1 week at a time. So it's really easy to do that, right? And you can actually filter whatever if you need, like shorter or longer periods of time, right? And you can actually have the transactions grouped together based upon what other column, sort, or group that you want to do, right? And so project managers can open them, go to the row or cell that they need to actually drill down and to get more details and make the edits right directly from there to make any changes they have. You can now customize the task pane. So if you click on the little I, the small letter I icon, it opens a customizable task pane that allows you to manage tasks, customize them, and trigger the flows, right? There's a new copy experience, so you can copy over the existing project name, calendar template, so on and so forth. Then the currency, things like that, right? And you can actually flow that can be customized. It's like, how do you want to do that, or pull those in, and then the work breakdown structure. Just know that it's going to copy over any work breakdown structure, so it can't have an existing work breakdown structure to copy something over, right? And then we can actually copy externally scheduled projects, right? So if they're scheduled over, again, no work breakdown structure on that. So that's what's new on project operations. And there's a nice little tutorial on how to use copilots in time entry, right? So it kind of goes over some details of using that copilot. And there's, 2 general things, right? This for the time entry and then for the generate comments, really what this copilot does. And those are the 2 primary things you want to do anyways, right? So log that time and generate those comments. Just like you want to have that voice command, the natural language query that converts that into the notes that you have on that. So it kind of goes through some details and instructions on enabling this. So first of all, you want to go into project ops, go into settings and general parameters, and go to the org unit, and then turn on that feature control within the Copilot, right? So also you want to access both features and whether you want to access both features in that chat experience or not. So then, of course, it's like the first thing is you want to log time. So how do you log the time? You open the page up and start a conversation with the chat. simple as that, right? And then anytime you enter that, it's like you might want to refresh it to make sure it gets entered right. And then if you click on the little sparkle icon on there, it indicates that that's been modified or by a user. So it's like, okay, so if it's been in a different area. Generating no comments, and generally the same experience, right? So you go into the time entries, enter the chat, and say generate comments or add comments or something like that, right? And then you say when do you want to actually do those comments, and then once they're generated, review those comments and make the edits, right? So you can refresh and see those entries. But this is a really, really nice thing on the like the field service. I know that we've had this for a while, but that's really important because nobody loves entering timesheets and generating reports after you do the work, right? Just to validate that that's going on there. But that's really important when you invoice things, and it's like, and you have to validate the work's going to be done and manage the project. So it takes one of those arduous tasks and simplifies that greatly. So that's time entry. It's kind of a nice thing. One thing I want to talk about Dynamics community, like this is my last show. I just want to keep on pointing this out. If you want to get answers for things, it's like I always go to docs.microsoft.com, but explore the Dynamics community. So it doesn't matter if you want some answers, you can actually crowdsource some of the things. But it's like you want to build that community and help. We try to document as much as we can, but not every single configuration and setup is documented. Of course, it's impossible with the different permutations. So you can crowdsource answers or look for best practices or look for solutions on that. So I just wanted to point that out, this being my last show for that, and I really like that. And the last thing on the HR retail business, Business Central and Project Arena is this is a really nice article by Patrick Moen. I'm not exactly sure. I don't know Patrick personally, but I thought this is a very good article. But it talks about, the 365, F&O commerce interface, which is basically the headquarters and the interface with the commerce components. And whether you want to use, the standard F&O headquarters integration or Azure API, right? Or use the Commerce Scale Unit, which is the standard stuff, right? So it kind of talks about the best practices and how to go about this. And I thought this is a really good article because partners do it different way and their customers do it different way, especially if they have, divergent different e-commerce solutions. So it talks about, first of all, the APIM, right, which is Azure API Management, right? So that's APIM. So why would you want to use APIM? So starts out with how you do this authentication. I thought this was really nice. Used to be from API key and certificates, then you go to OAuth 2. Now this goes in AAuth authentication or APIM authentication. So kind of talks about that and the advantages of that APIM integration, right? Talks about error handling and how to configure and report errors, just like the Azure App Insights, which is a standard that most IT Microsoft-based shops know. And then if you open AI or Swagger to use that, it's like, to manage things. So kind of talks a little bit about that. And then it talks about the best practices. Talks about the abstraction, right? Security, authentication, performance, flexibility, and API management. So whether it's like, the API management kind of acts as a facade. I had a brother-in-law once said facade, made me laugh. So facade or shell your system endpoints, right? So it'll link into it can be turned on for internal users, apps, or partners, and all that different things. Talks a little bit about security on that, right? And then it's like how to limit access and how to mask the URL, so it's like it prevents from malicious attacks. Talks about the authentication, right? So you can decouple the APIM client backend that prevents distribution of sensitive information. So you only get the information that you want instead of like the whole table and components like that. And then talks about performance. Now, one of the kind of internal jokes that me and my friends talk about, or colleagues talk about, is sometimes OData is considered slow data, especially for high volumes. Well, how do you manage that performance, right? If it's slow, and then it can actually get over 10 seconds long, right? So how do you throttle OData requests? Can you use caching? So if you've ever started up F&O after an update, it's super slow because it actually has to open up and cache that form in that information in that. So again, it's like if it's really slow, are you sure you didn't cache it, and how do you manage that? A little bit about security, some flexibility in that, right? So it's just a good article, and I thought this was like helpful for the audience, especially if you're using kind of the e-commerce components, right? Now let's go to F&O. So first of all, I just want to remind everybody, watch the proactive quality updates and look at the schedule. So first of all, what region are you in or what station you're in, right? So it looks at the different stations and then the given dates of where you're going to do these. So the next one is going to be, or right now, from November 26, 2020, from January 26th to the February 8th, which is PQU9, right? And then for that station is going to be that. So again, just make sure you're updated and keeping up to date with the system and understand when we're going to be updating the system itself. Compliance and licensing. So I know Bart, like, and I don't like to talk about compliance and licensing, but this is going to be a big issue for my customers, right? Because they're going to start getting notifications like 30 or 60, 90 days prior to the renewals, right? To see if you're compliant. And if you're not compliant, you're using the software, you get value out of it, so you're going to have to pay for it. And if you didn't license it correctly, then if you give somebody that just needed activity-based role and then they give them a supply chain, well, that's a license that you're paying for that you shouldn't have used, but you did it incorrectly. So there's all kinds of tools on how to manage this. So if you look at like on available licenses, it's like, okay, so this is on the admin page of what licensing, how do you do those? Then you go into F&O and then manage those licenses with an F&O, what they can actually do. So you can license it by role and then actually make sure that you're compliant versus the license, the users, the CALs that you actually license on that. So really important. If you're in the IT department, you want to make sure that you check that prior to this before you get the renewals. Otherwise, it could be kind of a difficult conversation with your account exec and your SSP onto that. So there's a couple on those. It's like there's a nice report with the supply compliance summary on this. And I've talked about this shows like a few months back. Again, it's worth repeating and make sure this is top of mind, that you kind of go through this at least periodically. Make sure you're licensed correctly, right? So you're not paying for things that you're not using, and then also you're using things that you're actually not paying for, right? So
it's definitely different. Change is always hard, but it is nice that it's kind of unified with the rest of the Microsoft licensing stack now in one place.
Yeah, that's a good call out, Bart, right? Because that's just maddening, which kind of leads it to a kind of a tangent, but it's similar. Is LCS is going to be deprecated soon enough. Everything is going to go over to PPAC, right? So we're going to have one unified system. So, but everybody's been watching the show pretty much knows that, right? So another thing is community interest groups have moved from Yammer to Viva Engage, and so. Again, these are communities. This is where you get your information. This is where you can, where we release information about like what's coming up and latest details, and you can chat with the community. So again, it's just a great resource. I wanted to remind everybody of that, this being the last show. And then a couple other things are kind of nice. It's like, okay, this is, for an IT performance issue, how do you capture a trace and what's the best way to do it, especially with things swapping out from LCS. So how do you capture a client trace, and actually how do you go through on the details of that? And I'm not going to spend too much time on this, right? But you go with an F&O, you assign the users, then you do the performance. There's another one to do with if it's cloud hosted or VHDs or on-premise, right? So on-premise, we have a very small percentage of our customers on-premise because it's just much more difficult and it's easier on the cloud. But if you have Department of or certain restrictions that it has to be, and you don't get like internet connections in sub-Saharan Africa, in some place like that is important, and how do you manage it? So, so kind of some detail of that and how to manage the trace. I thought that was worthwhile to put in there. And the last thing is troubleshoot electronic reporting configurations, right? So I have some partners who used to say, it's like, okay, I'm going to use an ISV because it's slow. Well, it's like you don't know how to use it and you actually didn't configure it right. The performance is actually caused by a misconfiguration. So, but here's how to actually go through these things. But it's like there's no sense of doing that when it's coming right out of the box from Microsoft. So there's three different components in this. You have to collect the data, right? You analyze the data that's collected, and you're based upon the results, you make changes, right? Decide what you need to do. So So, pretty simple, but first of all, you need to analyze the execution runtime, right? It can depend upon different factors, right? So if there's other tasks running, there's changing, if things haven't been cached, right? So therefore you want to do it multiple different times. So it's like if it's the first time you run it and it's a new, like, test environment and you haven't cached anything, well, first of all, it's going to be slow because it isn't cached, but it's got to spin those forms and those executions, those methods and things up, right? So that's the first thing you want to do. And then you analyze the tracer parser traces, right? You go through that, you analyze the database calls, right? And the caching, analyze the perf view traces on that. So basically the action center, you look in the log, you look at the execution time, right? If it's a long time, right? If the execution with the amount of data, so if it's small data, it might be just a loading time. If it's a large data, it might involve processing with the X++. You might have to actually change some of that code, right? You analyze that, you analyze the database calls, you analyze the performance traces, right? And look if there's any like duplicated data that it's actually pulling in and pulling way too much data into it. So it kind of goes through some of the detail, right? And collecting the data. And then, what do you do for making changes, right? So are you use caching? Do you actually use caching on that to reduce the volume for the data fetch and make it smaller packets? If it's use cached, do you have to parameterize the kill field, right? Do you use a join data source on that? Do you want to filter the information so you're not actually pulling all kinds of things instead of like a filter instead of a where function on that? So use the collected data, use collected data function on that. And then also the last thing is like rewrite parts of the configuration X++, as I mentioned. So this is pretty much for an experienced developer to kind of work on if they do that. But if you're having performance issues on that, this is the place you want to start and work through. So I thought that was kind of important for some of our IT folks here, and this is kind of an IT focused last session that we had here, Bart. But that's what I have on this fortnight.
And that last one seems like something that Copilot's probably going to have a pretty big influence on in the coming months, doesn't it?
You'd think so, right? Because a lot of this stuff is going to be Copilot, but in the meantime, you're going to have to go about it, and you should really understand how it works anyways.
For sure, because you need to be able to figure out if Copilot's giving you good advice. So it's not guaranteed that it will. But it's all good.
Yes.
And Dan, last show. Fantastic having a great run with you as a co-host. I've really appreciated it. I wish you all the best and have a lot of fun in retirement. I don't know really what else to say other than live long and prosper, man.
Right. I love that, right? So I'm a Trekkie. Bart, it's been a pleasure. It's been great having you as a colleague, as a friend, and doing this show. It's something to look forward to all the time. So hopefully we're off to good hands, and hopefully this will be running for many years to come. So thanks, everybody. Thanks for tuning in and making the show a success.
All right, we'll call that a wrap. I'll see all of you in a fortnight. We'll see you someday, maybe as a guest returner or something, Dan, if we get lucky. And if not, just
you never
enjoy
know.
yourself.
Oh, I'll tell you fishing stories.
There you go. All right. Thanks, all.